So welcome to Abby Burke from the Asylum Seeker Resource Center. She's a solicitor, and she's here to talk with us today a little bit about how her work helping refugees and asylees intersects with some of the issues in politics, philosophy, and economics we've just been talking about. So Abby, welcome, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So Abby, can you tell us a little bit about what you do as a solicitor?
So what I do is about 80% refugee casework. So we're helping people lodge an application at the start of the process. Then if they're getting knocked back, we might take them to merits review, either at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, if they arrived by plane, or if they are less lucky and have arrived by boat, the Immigration Assessment Authority, which is quite different. And if they are still unsuccessful, we might take their case to court if we think there's been an error of law in the merits review decision.
So you're working really inside the system and you get to know your clients really well. When you look at statistics, sometimes what it's like for people going through the system doesn't really pop out. Can you tell us a bit about what it's like for someone that you might represent to go through the process of trying to get their claims heard as refugees?
So it can be very challenging for individuals whose largest asset in proving their claims is essentially their personal story. And so the way we usually set about assisting people to make their case is, for example, by doing a detailed statutory declaration, talking about their life story, why they fear harm, why they can't go back. But a lot of the time you are up against decision makers who may be, quite sceptical or even cynical. So if an individual, can't prove by way of video footage, for example, or photographs, what happened to them, they can really have an uphill battle to satisfy a decision maker that what they say happened to them actually happened. So that's one big challenge that they face.
So what happens when they're successful?
So these days, if you're successful, it depends how you arrived, what outcome you will receive. So if you arrive by plane, you would be entitled to a permanent protection visa. That gives you permanent residency, and down the track you can apply for citizenship. So that is sort of the gold standard of visas that you would be entitled to as a asylum seeker. Unfortunately, if you arrive by boat, most likely you'll only be entitled to a temporary protection visa, which is a 3-year visa, renewable, or a safe haven enterprise visa, which is a 5-year visa with the possibility of certain pathways to more permanent visas, but the grounds on which you can go through those pathways are still very unclear. Big downside with these temporary protection visas of both kinds is that, for example, there's no entitlement to family reunion. So in the scenario of a man who might be more mobile and able to get himself here, he might have a wife and children in his home country who he is likely never to see again. It's the practical result.
Wow. So when someone comes from Afghanistan or Myanmar, can you walk me through a little bit of what happens? So how do they get here? Do they just hop on a plane? Do they have to have certain visas first, or do people come in illegally? Can you give me a sort of idea of what it's like for the people you represent?
So for Afghanistan, largely boat arrivals and largely historical.
When you say historical, what do you mean?
Few people are managing to reach us by boat anymore because of certain measures taken by the government to discourage and intercept boat arrivals. But Afghanistan, big source country for boat arrivals in the past 10 years. Why by boat? Because most Afghans wouldn't get, for example, a tourist visa that would enable them to come by air.
I see.
Why not? Because it's known to be a refugee source country, so it's very difficult to get a visitor visa, for example. you would have to satisfy the person approving the visa that your genuine intention was to come temporarily and not to seek asylum.
Abby, you mentioned that there's a difference for migrants who come by boat versus plane. Why is there a difference there?
For the last number of years, the government has brought in a number of changes designed to discourage boat arrivals. And one of those measures has been to give boat arrivals different rights on review.
What do you mean by rights on review?
So if they have a negative decision at the department stage...
So if they say you're not a refugee?
Correct. They are entitled to a fresh look at that decision. If you're going to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, if you arrive by plane, that's going to be a de novo hearing, so a complete rehearing where you get to meet your decision maker, you can introduce new material, but in the case of boat arrivals, you have access to a altered version of merits review by the Immigration Assessment Authority. No interview, so it's all done on the papers, except in exceptional circumstances. I haven't had one client yet who has managed to get a hearing, oral hearing.
Wow.
And there are very tight limits on reintroducing any new information. You have to get over certain hurdles.
I see. So if you come by boat, your options are just limited.
On review, yes.
You can't even get in front of somebody to chat with them.
Exactly.
So the work you do is very much on the ground, applied, talking to people who need a voice. Now, is there any kind of philosophical view that underpins the work that you do?
So I would say that our work is underpinned by a universalist understanding of human rights. The idea that these rights are important and people's ability to, for example, seek a protection visa shouldn't be affected by arbitrary things like how they arrived in Australia or whether they have enough money to get private legal representation.
It must take a lot of dedication to do this kind of work. I mean, can you help us get a sense of why is it that you chose to do this sort of work?
I'd always been interested in going into the area, dating back to university. I'd been quite perturbed by what I saw as the gradual ratcheting up of the legal measures to prevent refugees getting visas. I thought it would be quite a dispiriting space to work in. Thought it would be a downer, and it sometimes is. That is not untrue, that the system is really stacked against the applicants. But it's very exciting when you do help someone establish their claims and they do get a good outcome. It's incredibly rewarding. The work is also really interesting. Being paid to learn about the situation in different countries, to keep abreast of political developments in parts of the world where there is a lot going on. I find that really fascinating.
What about people who may not have a career in, say, a legal NGO or in the medical care system, but who want to get involved? Well, for one thing, how are ordinary Australians already involved? And two, where could they go if they wanted to?
The ASRC has a huge amount of volunteers. The numbers we get are quite incredible and a testament to the interest that Victorians have in what's going on. So volunteers can do all sorts of interesting things at the ASRC. They can cook a hot lunch for the members, the asylum seekers and the staff. They can work in our team as a volunteer paralegal. We get a lot of law students, but also other students who have an interest in that work. Perhaps they did an international relations degree or PPE degree, and we wouldn't be able to operate without these teams of people because limited resources.
Abby Burke, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.